On today's podcast, we have our first ever father-daughter interview. Please welcome to the podcast, Paul and Sydney Maurice. How are we doing today, guys?
Great, thank you.
Couldn't be better.
Yeah, great. Well, we can. You guys are pretty much our biggest interview yet?
Yeah, it must be.
We're your first.
Yeah, exactly. It'll sound like our first, that's for sure. So obviously, guys, a little bit of a weird summer for everyone. How's your summer been so far? And how have you guys been keeping busy?
Why don't you answer that?
No, good thanks.
Well, it's a different summer, fall for sure. I mean, from a hockey point of view, I kind of missed a block in the middle of your normal summer. This is the first September, October of my life that I haven't been in a rink full-time coaching a hockey team or playing hockey or something like that. So it's been a major shift. As much as Sydney may agree or disagree with this, the other parts of it have been fantastic, right? I mean, I've got to spend more time with my kids since March, since our pause, than I would have in the last 5 years combined. So they're forced to be at home with me, and it's been great for dads all over, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know. You feel the same way? How do you feel?
I do. I think I've seen you more in the past 6 months in the past 6 years.
For sure. For
So,
sure. So that part's been, you know what? I've enjoyed that.
So what do you as a family or together been doing to pass some time? Are you like a board game family, or are you guys Netflix family? What are you guys doing to pass the time?
You know what? We're doing all the things that we would normally do, just not in the location that we'd normally do it. So by the time 9 o'clock at night rolls around, when your day kind of starts to shut down, there's either a hockey game on for me, so some of it really hasn't changed that much. I find in some ways I'm busier now in some ways than I was before, because I got all this time where I can do other things that I don't get the chance to do, right? And then, so we had a lot of dinners together probably early on. And then when some of the restrictions eased, and but Sid's back at school full time, right? My other two kids are back at school full time. So we just don't see them that much. So many things, probably like everybody, so many things have changed for all of us. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff that's exactly the same way. We just have to do it in a different way than we did it before.
I just enjoy having the time to talk to you. I know that might sound weird, but like,
yeah.
You know.
Well, when you're not around, right? That Sid doesn't. When I call Sid on her phone, she doesn't answer. Right? I got is getting a text in. So
that's like anybody though.
Like a direct text. Taylor gets it. I walk right down to her room so that she can't ignore me. So there's a whole lot of good stuff going on here.
Kids now FaceTime every conversation. I just found that out yesterday, so you might want to try that.
Main mode of.
That puts a lot of pressure on what you're looking like every day, doesn't it? I don't think I like that pressure.
So, Paul, you were named a head coach at the young age of 28 for the Hartford Whalers. What was that experience like for you, and what was it like coaching guys who were of the same age as you, and maybe some guys that were older than you? I can't imagine that would be very easy.
No, it was a real challenge. The biggest one was my age, actually, and my inexperience. So I won't bore your viewers to death, but I had a really unusual path to the NHL, obviously, at 28 when you get a job. So some strange things had happened. So the players that were older than me were always easier to deal with. Because, so that's mid-90s. Some of these guys came into the league early 80s, late 70s, so some of the Brad McCrimmons of the world. They came in a culture that the players played and the coach's coach did what the coach said. And they also probably taught me maybe the most important thing that I utilize every day. Brad McCrimmon once in my office, players just want a direct answer, right? They don't want a lot. They just need a direct answer. And you know, they need it to be the truth. So I took that close to heart, in part because I had to. That's how I had to operate at 28 to survive and win in the National Hockey League. Tell the truth and tell it as quickly as you possibly can to players. And I've used that ever since. Don't lie to them. Sometimes maybe they wish I would. You know, I mean, it's true. Sometimes people want it. And I'm not saying I'm harsh with the truth all the time. But having players on my team that were, you know, well, put an example. Brad McCrimmon's first year pro, I was in grade 7. That was the gap. And, but he taught me a valuable lesson, you know, be direct and be honest as quickly as you can.
First year coaching, do you have a memory that, you know, either a mistake you made or a play that you put out there or like a line change or something that happened that first year that you look back when you've got some time to think and just kind of chuckle at yourself?
Both. I mean, actually, yeah. So your memories of those are my first few years are pretty strong in a lot of ways because it was such a challenge. But I remember my first game, and we were playing San Jose and we won 7-4. But I don't remember anything about the game. Like when the game was over, I couldn't have really have told you what happened because all I was doing was looking at my bench card, making sure I got the next lineup. I swear to God. And then you get a power play or you get a penalty kill or something, and things change, and you're all messed up. I don't remember, but I remember we were playing at home, and we were playing. I think it was Detroit. Anyway, they had a certain control breakout setup that they'd run the same time. So during the next timeout, I made a switch with our control breakout, and we went down the ice and scored. And it was way too easy, right? And I'm kind of smiling to myself thinking, yeah, that's way too easy. And the guys on the bench couldn't believe that I had just done it. But it was more, they didn't know what happened on the ice either. Like they were shocked and awed. I think it helped a little bit. But at the end of the day, they made a bunch of mistakes on their control breakout. So what I said to do looked perfect, but I never told anybody it was the other team. It wasn't my play.
Yeah.
I thought I was really, for about an hour, everybody thought I was really smart.
That's awesome. Okay, Sid, well, let's get back to you here for a little second here. Growing up with an NHL coach in your house, can you remember any advice your dad gave you that helped with your hockey career growing up?
I was a little bit, for some reason when I was growing up, I seemed to think that I didn't need to listen to my parents, you know, with hockey, which maybe like looking back, if I had taken his advice more, maybe I would have ended up further than women's junior. That would have been cool. Still a great time. But I remember like at first, sometimes his advice would go over my head, but there was one time you took me on a tournament in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you gave me some really good advice with how to forecheck, and like I've used that ever since, and it always went pretty well for me.
So standard stuff, guys, like coaches are just like parents, right? Except I got 23 kids on my team. So you actually, even when you're mad at them, you still care for them and you want to give them good advice and you want the best for them. But they're not going to listen to you, right? Like, you have to prove it to them. And then even when you prove it to them, my middle son, Jake here, was working on his wrist shot one day in the garage. And I went out, and we were in Toronto, and I wanted to show him something and about his grip. And he said, no, that's not it. So I tried it about 5 times. So he must have said, no, Dad, that's not it, about 5 times in a row. And then he looks at me, it's not it, Dad. I just need a new stick. So that was kind of, Sydney would listen to me more than the 2 boys would. But that was probably because Sydney was very competitive, even at a young age. She went out and had fun, but if you dropped the puck and the game was on, she wanted to play and she wanted to win. My 2 boys never listened to me. I don't think they were too interested in getting to the next level. They just loved playing for the fun of it. And House League was fine for them, and they had a great time. And it's like hockey, as you guys know, is for everybody. And you can be a guy who just wants to play the lowest letter, the lowest number he can, and have fun, which is interesting. My younger brother's like that, and he still plays hockey today 2 or 3 times a week. My older brother didn't make any of the tournament teams or the big teams, and he still plays hockey today. I made all of them and haven't played a game in about 30 years. So there's a different kind of love of the game, right, that happens. Sydney will come back to hockey and play. I think is when she gets a little bit older, she's going to end up playing hockey in her 30s and her 40s and her 50s. She'll come back and play.
Yeah, for sure.
But she still is. She's a very easygoing, kind person. until you drop the puck, and you want to make sure you have all your pads on because you're going to take some that's the truth. That's the truth. She's kind. She just, if you drop the puck, it's on.
Now, Sid, over the years, have you ever given any advice to your dad about like a power play breakout or a forecheck or a certain play to use? Like, you ever bring out the whiteboard after a game or something like that?
Honestly, no. I mainly keep my advice to the clothing area because that's where he needs the most help.
Oh, that's a shot.
Yeah.
It's the truth. But you got to divide this in a line.
Listen.
Your mom handles the suits, the ties. You handle everything else.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So just I would have no idea to buy this shirt. So Sydney does a lot of that. Okay. I'm not gifted in that department. Sydney is. So.
It is nice. Like, I come more to him for coaching help sometimes, right? Like, I'm very thankful to have that resource.
You know what's really interesting about that is you would think, I don't know, I got about 1,600 games in, that when she comes.
I'm like, hey, do you think this drill for a 8-year-old girls practice? And he's like, well, you got to get them to pick it up off down low. And I'm like,
well,
they won't even know what the rails are. Like, you know.
No. If she asks me a hockey question, I can answer. If she asks me what to do with 8-year-old girls, she has far more experience than I do, and that's more value. Like putting an NHL head coach on the ice with 8-year-old girls, I don't know what level they're at. I mean, I haven't done that he's now 35 years. So I'm more interested in the programs that you guys run and the development stuff that she does. I find it very, very interesting because I just don't see it, right? I'm not exposed to it very much. So I would be if I had to go run a 12-year-old practice, I'd be calling my daughter. She has. So when I do some of this stuff for charity, where they'll auction off a practice and a group will buy it, it goes to our youth foundation, which is just an incredible program. And when I'm going out, she's my first call, right? So, because she can come out and basically run the practice, I can skate around and tap all the kids on the pads and say, hey, how you doing? You know, so that's what's great about having kind of another coach in the family. You get jammed up with a practice, you just call your daughter.
Now, is that cool for you, Paul, that your daughter's kind of followed a little bit in your footsteps there in the coaching department?
You know what, yes is the simplest answer, but the truth is coaching and teaching are the same thing. Mm-hmm. Exactly the same thing, and it really doesn't matter the arena. And Sydney's mom's an ex-teacher, and she was really good at it. So Sydney's in education now, which is great because it's her strength. And I listen to her do Zoom calls with hockey teams or with their students now. She has a gift for it. I think she's going to be a spectacular teacher. So I don't know that I can take credit and everybody for her being in the hockey part of it, because it's actually just teaching. And her mom's was probably a better teacher than I am a coach. But Sydney has that gift to do it, and she has a love to do it. So it's nice. It's nice to have one of your kids kind of follow it a little bit.
That's great. So, Sid, this question's for you. You know, you're watching hockey games, you see your dad behind the bench. Any things that kind of stand out that have made you laugh over the years? For me, I know when, Paul, you take your glasses off and start rubbing your eyes, we're not happy with something, or power play hasn't performed or something. Anything, Sid, that you kind of look back on and laugh at over the years?
Yeah, where do you think I learned how to swear?
Yeah.
My daughter does not swear, fellas.
Mom, what's he saying?
Yeah, well,
that's
maybe
when you start trying to
mother.
mouth the same. I definitely learned a few from her too, but I think my favorite was
Eating from your mom and the swearing from your dad.
What's that?
That's what people always ask me, like, oh, does he ever get mad like that at home? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, like, I've never seen you like that at home. Like when I saw you get ejected that one time.
Yeah.
Oh my, I laughed so hard.
Well, I appreciate that.
I didn't know his face could get that red. That was a really special.
I mean, I've got a lot of years in that's only happened once. So
that's why it was entertaining.
You know, when I come home, and it was true So this is the piece to this interview that's not maybe understood is what the home life of a coach is like, and that's why Sydney's mom is the key piece to this operation, because I do come home angry, right? And you get on a bad run. And what's true of NHL coaching, you know, the great ones, I mean, you get fired. So I've been fired 3. So prior, the month or 2 prior, it's not a very nice place to live. So Sydney's mom has been a spectacular role model for kind of keeping us all in tune with the fact that it's a family. And me, you know, she'll grab me and say, hey, you know, these are your kids, not your players. And that's usually, you know, everybody has their lines. You can't talk to them like they're your players. So anytime that I've gotten close to being too growly at the dinner table, she fires one across the bow at me, and that settles me in pretty good, you know. But that's what coaching is, right? Trying to figure out when to give somebody a hug or a kick in the pants. And that's kind of, it's certainly not when we're talking about youth and kids, but when you're talking about adults, like there's a lot of pressure that's there. And that's not just on the players, it's on the coaches too. So I'm glad to hear you say that you never really saw too much of it at home.
No, you've always been, if I've ever needed a pep talk about life or anything like that,
Yeah.
anytime I've had a talk with you, I immediately am like, okay, yeah, I can do anything. Like, I can do this. This isn't a big deal. Like,
Yeah.
So.
Well, you're pretty easy to work with for the most part.
Yeah,
hey, how about we work? How about your room? How about your room?
Wow.
Can we get that clean?
Still asking. I'm working on it.
We're working on it, guys. We don't have it all figured out. We're still working on our power play here.
So Paul, you mentioned a little earlier, you know, it's not always an easy job. You know, you come home stressed sometimes after, you know, a losing streak or something. Anything you do in particular to get away from the game, you know, kind of come home and not think about the game? Anything you do to kind of take your mind off it?
Not well. I didn't do that very well early on, but that's also like there was some really unusual things about my career path. My kids were very, very young while I was in the NHL. So normally, I don't know what the average age, but it's got to be in the mid 40s to late 40s for coaches. So most of their kids are older, right? So our kids we had 3 kids under 3, and I was coaching in the NHL. So I didn't do anything else, right? And that makes me just like every other parent. Chase kids around them. I'll go back through my kid, and I didn't really do much. My wife did almost all of it. But I like to read. And that would be, so some things have come in and out, golfing, all those other kind of things. In the off season, being up here in Winnipeg has just exploded with the things that you can do. Like, I like to fish. Didn't realize how much I love to fish till I got here, but I can fish with Sid, right? So I can fish with everybody in my family. My wife likes to, my daughter likes to, the boys do. So that's a real good one. But I've always, the one constant is I like to read. And I like to try to learn new things now with all these new things you guys got going, like YouTube and stuff like that. You can learn anything you want. And that would be, I'll throw a game a lot of times, and most times I'm watching hockey, but a lot of times I'll just sit and read, and that kind of settles me, puts me in a different place and settles me out.
Just kind of continuing on with that point, like what advice would you give to a young coach who's just getting in, you know, coaching at a competitive level or a serious level where it's his livelihood or her livelihood, and, you know, starting off a family, just getting married and, you know, having young kids? What advice would you give them, you know, from your past?
That's a good one. Usually I get, what's advice would you give to a young coach? And that's completely different than the question you just asked me, because there's a tremendous amount of stress that goes in those years. Because it's not like you get fired quickly in coaching. It's not like, hey, come on and coach this team, we're going to give you an 8-year run. I got lucky with that. So, and there's also, doesn't really necessarily translate, you know, you're coaching the junior B team or the junior A team, you get fired, you're 33 years old. It's not like you go down to the bank and say, hey, I was a hockey coach, give me a job. Like, it doesn't translate necessarily easily to what you want to do. So the first thing is really good if your spouse has a good job. So, but that's true. That was all part of, you know, my wife was a high school teacher. So she had a good job, and she kept it at times. And matter of fact, our first year married, I lived in Hartford. She lived at home in Windsor because didn't know if I was getting fired. Like, it was a real shaky time. So having a stable job in the house takes some pressure off. You have to absolutely love the game. And the biggest one I would say after that is you got to figure out a way to not bring that pressure to the rink. So one of the things that one of my old bosses, Pete Kermanis Jr., who owned the Carolina Hurricanes for years, he'd always say to me, you got to smile more. And I never got that, right? As a matter of fact, I don't know if I guess it probably bothered me, but I understood when I got older what he meant, and that you have to show the people around you that you're actually enjoying what you do. You know that line we always tell players, players got to have fun, players got to have fun. We've got to make this fun for the kids. I agree. But I think what's more important, no, that's not true. What's as important is you want the kids on the ice to see the coach having fun. So, because all of my great coaching influences loved coaching us. Mike Zook Sr. and when I was at Bantam, I loved going to his practices. He was in a great mood on the ice. So it made, hey, the coaches, it's like your parents. It's like Sydney will tell you, she would be in a better mood when I'm in a great mood, right? For the most part. If I'm in a bad mood, she's kind of, she doesn't want to be around me. Let the players see you having fun. And they will play harder for you because they'll be happy and they want you happy. But I think especially for those youth coaches that come out, I see it. You see those guys that are coaching 14, 15-year-olds, and they got to win so they can get the next job, to the midget job, so they can get – I get all that. But, man, at 13, like, that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself and 13-year-old kids, your livelihood to get to the next level. And then the last piece of advice I would say is what I've kind of done is continue to go to school, so that if you get fired and it doesn't work out for you, you don't have to go back to 4 years of school. So I've every time, my first year of university was 1986, just to let you feel young. And I've got 5 courses left for a university degree. So just kind of every time I got a gap, I would go back to school.
So Paul, I always knew you worked with Jim Rutherford in Carolina. I wasn't aware of how far back that relationship went. Can you tell us a little bit about that relationship and how important he's been to your coaching career?
So Jimmy Rutherford drafted me in 1984 to be a defenseman for the Windsor Spitfires. So I played for him, and then he hired me to be an assistant coach in 1988. And then he hired me to be the head coach of a major junior team in 1993 at the age of 26 with Pete DeBoer, who's now the head coach of the Las Vegas team. So Pete and I were roommates, ex-junior players. In 1990, so that's 93, 94, he added the GM title to my job when he went to Hartford. And then in 1995, we had won the OHL championship and lost the Memorial Cup final. And he hired me to be an assistant coach of the Hartford Whalers in June. And then he fired the guy and he hired me to be the head coach of the Hartford Whalers in November. So that's how I got to be him. And then from that point on, he was just, my best friend and mentor for the next 25 years. So it's a very unusual relationship. The number of stories, the number of things he told me, pieces of advice that I probably balked at first because I was so stubborn early on about my beliefs, set me back. If I just listened to everything that he had said, I would have been fine. I'll give you a little example. And I didn't fight this one. So I'm going to take it over as a head coach, and I need some advice. And he says, wear good shoes. Like I'm looking for something, He said, yeah, wear good shoes. But there was a point to what he was saying. He says, when you're in the locker room, and he relates this back to his playing days. You're in the locker room and you're yelling at everybody. They're all looking down. They're not going to look you in the eye. They're all looking at your feet. And if your shoes are a mess and you're a slob, you got bad shoes on, that's what they're going to think about you. So wear good shoes. That was one of the first pieces of advice. Like, there's something to professionalism that you can take out of that, how you walk around your room, how you interact with your room. But Jim had 1,000 of those, and some of them very detailed about hockey, but some of them about how to deal with people. You know, 2002, we won the Eastern Conference, but in the first round, I got Artur Serbia and then we're playing New Jersey. And that's when the seeding problem just comes in. So we actually finish in 6th in the conference, but we get the 3rd seed. So Jersey, who's either winning Stanley Cups or going to win Stanley, they're in their heyday, they're in their prime, but we beat them at home twice. And had no business beating them at home. Artur Serbia stood and said, "We're going into New Jersey now for Game 3." And Jimmy says, "You should play Weeksy. You should play Kevin Weeks." I'm like, "Look at you, crazy man! We're up 2-0 on these guys. Archie's fine. He's standing on his head. Why would I play my backup goalie?" All right, fine. So Jimmy never made you do anything. He said, "Fine." So we just get shellacked, right? I got to pull Archie after 2 because he's had about 90 shots. It's just awful. So we're going into Game 4 now, and he says, you should put Kevin Weeks in the net. And you can't do that. We're up 2-1, right? So I can't do it. So I put Artur Serbia. I pull him. And I know when I'm pulling him after the second period that I got to go with Weeks now in Game 5. And I'm pretty sure if we don't win this game, that's it, man, I'm done. So in between, so I put Weeksy in. We get into overtime, and we have a huge turnover in front of it. Puck comes out to John Madden. I'm standing on the bench watching. It comes out to Madden in the slot, and I'm actually stepping off the bench because there's no way he can miss this shot. It's over. Season's over, possibly my career. And as I'm stepping down, the crowd goes berserk, right? Because Weeksy's come across the crease with this incredible glove save. Saves it. We win in overtime. We win the series. We go on, we beat Montreal, then we beat Toronto. So Kevin Weeks is like really responsible for just about everything that we acquired over my lifetime. Because if it wasn't for that save, I think it goes back to your question. What about those pressure times? I lose my job there. It's my first year coaching. I'm not coaching in the NHL for another 15 years, right? You got to reinvent yourself again. So thank God for Jimmy. He was almost right. And thanks God for Kevin Weeks.
So you mentioned Pete DeBoer earlier. Again, another guy that I kind of knew that you had a relationship with, but wasn't aware of how far back that went. Do you guys, what's it like coaching against him now? And do you guys keep a record of who's winning that battle?
Yeah, I don't know that we can qualify it that way. I think that my teams have beaten Pete's teams more, but we would have always played worse than Pete's teams in those losses. So we beat him in San Jose 2 years ago, and I met him out after the game in front of the bus, and we both agreed it might have been the worst hockey game ever played. So we win, but the hockey's never any good. I don't know why. Yeah, Pete, so it's a Jim Rutherford story in a lot of ways, and it's also a Tom Webster story, but that's another. Pete was drafted the next year into the Windsor Spitfires. So we were teammates, then roommates, then he went to law school, and I hired him as an assistant. It's more accurate to say we coached together than I hired him as assistant. And then stood in each other's wedding parties, all those other kind of things. So so much of your life is the people that you get lucky enough to meet, right? You're lucky to be born to the parents you are. I just have been always very, very lucky in my life that the people around me have been special and great examples for me. But it's also, I've been lucky. It's also the people that you choose, right? Who you decide to be with, who you decide your friends are, has a major impact in your life.
Well, Sid, being the daughter of an NHL head coach, I mean, it's pretty sweet, but I'm sure it's not always that easy with the media, with social media, where everybody has their opinion nowadays. Can get a little bit annoying. How have you handled that throughout the years, and how has that affected your life at certain times?
Well, first off, I didn't know that what my dad did, I didn't know people cared about it until we moved to Toronto. Because in North Carolina, like Raleigh actually has a pretty decent hockey community, but it's still small. Like, basketball, football, kind of, that's supreme down there. So when I moved to Toronto, I was suddenly like really confused because he couldn't come watch my games because there'd be like crowds of kids waiting for him at the front of the arena. And one time this guy tried to follow me into a bathroom asking me about a trade deal. And I was like, dude, I have no idea what you're talking about. So that was kind of the first indication for me that people cared. I don't know. And then when I got older and social media became more accessible to me, I had to I went through a phase where I would like search his name on Twitter and want to reply to people and be like, you don't know what you're talking about. But obviously can't do that. I just think it's at this point, you know, like tuning it out and knowing that not everybody, I shouldn't say not everybody knows what they're,
No, you know what?
but not everybody sees like what goes into it, right?
But they're all necessary. Like I said earlier, like, well, hockey's for everybody. You get to a point that you understand, like, this is all I do, and it's all I've done for the last 30 years. But I need that guy to be so upset of who I have on the power play that he sends his tweet because he loves the game. He's passionate about the Winnipeg Jets. That's what sports is all. Like, if you want to talk about the biggest takeaway that I had from the bubble was, I'm not sure. Well, I got to be careful. The game's almost no fun with no fans in the seats. Like, it's dead. Now, those guys are playing hard, and then it takes a tremendous amount of mental focus for those players that are still in it. But this game is no fun if it's a studio game, if there's no fans. So we need, for the game to flourish, we need those people to be connected. And there's almost always an answer to every, why isn't this guy on the top on the power play? But it's probably not very flattering to that guy. So I'm not going to give you that answer. I'm not going to come out and say, well, look, I'd love, yeah, I understand you want Sydney on the point on the power play, but she can't cross over.
Okay. Actually, I do agree with the one-timer.
She's a little slow on the one time. She can cross over, but the one-timer's got to.
Yeah, I need work on
that. But I love her, right?
See,
and
constructive criticism. Yeah.
Yeah, I was making,
but
this was
everybody has
more of
their opinions, right? And
an
they're entitled
analogy,
to that.
right?
That's
Like,
good.
anyway. Let's tell her she just got a bad tweet about Sydney's crossovers. My point being is that I'm not going to tell anybody out there the negative part of why Sydney's not on the power play. It's none of their business. I'm not doing that to my players. The social media, for sure, is hardest on your family, right? Your mom and dad, you know, a reporter doesn't like you. When you're in the game for a long time, you kind of get it figured out of what it is, and you need fans to be passionate. So you need people to be upset with you. And I get a pretty big kick out of some of them. Like, it's pretty funny. Like, we have a pretty good giggle over some of the things that get said. But
oh yeah, some things are entertaining.
But it's not something that. So I don't have any social media accounts. It's not for that. It's just I don't need it. I didn't grow up with it. It doesn't make my life better. These kids are all over, right? And my middle one does the play-by-play for the Winnipeg Blues. Like, he's into hockey, so he reads everything. And I know he hears lots of nasty stuff about his dad, but he also hears lots of good stuff about his dad, and that's life, right? You got to
well,
get
that's
used to
the
it.
thing, right? It's like highs and lows.
Yeah.
Because I've been in arenas where they put your face on the jumbotron and everybody boos, and that's a weird thing to have thousands of people.
I wasn't there. I never knew that happened.
Yeah, that went over your head. I was in Carolina. I remember that one.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, like here or in other places or years before that, you have thousands of people cheering for him. So it's just like,
yeah,
it's weird, but
take the good with the bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can't really complain about anything in my life. So.
Okay, so Paul, today's athletes they have to be handled a little bit differently than back in the day. You've always seemed to connect with your players on every team that you've coached. Is that something that you had to get good at, or is that something that just came natural to you?
No, I think it goes back to the very first thing that when we started this conversation, fellas. Be honest as fast as you can. That translates across all players. I do think it maybe resonated a little bit more years ago, because I think the guys that I had probably got pretty direct feedback from their dads, you know. So here, the difference now in that social media, the biggest difference is players used to come to an NHL team and that was their family, and that was their culture. That was where they got their feedback in terms of how hard they were working, what kind of player they were. And now not all players get that. Their culture isn't their team, it's their own team. And a lot of these guys truly have their own team, or it's other players, or players' movement has become much more powerful in their ability to move. So if they don't like their situation, they just go somewhere else, right? But for the most part, if you go back to kind of the exercise that I do, if I have a meeting with a player and it's going to be possibly contentious, I'll sit for a while until I get what I want out of that meeting down to one sentence. And sometimes that sentence is, I just want you to know how, pick your word, but angry I am. Maybe that's what it is. You just, you and I have been fighting over your ice time, and then you play like that and you want more ice time. But if you can boil it down to directly what specifically it is, I want to tell you how proud I am of you. I want to tell you, I just wanted you to know I'm really happy for you, because that was awesome. So that would be like the message that you give Connor Hellebuck when you find out that he wins the Vezina. And your message to him is, I'm just calling to say congratulations and just to tell you that I'm so happy for you, because you worked so hard to do this, and you've got the recognition, and you did it in a year where the Winnipeg Jets had so much going against it, and you put up your best performance. Congratulations, how wonderful that is. So I think if you just stick to the truth, you can pretty much take that and transfer it over any generation.
So going over your coaching career, there's been, the game's changed a lot. It's been going from a clutch and grab game to now a more offensive game, fast-paced game. Video has become a big part in it. Analytics has come into the game now. What is something that you really feel that has really changed the game over your coaching career?
Well, the major change is 2005, 2006, the lockout. They came back with taking the obstruction out. And the truth is, the team that I had in Carolina, we won an Eastern Conference with it, and we lost to, one of the 10 best possibly teams in the history of the NHL, the 2002 Detroit Red Wings. And they have, I believe, 9 Hall of Fame players on that, and they have Scotty Bowman. So it was, this incredible team, but we could play with them because we could clutch and grab, and we had to, right? So to put it in perspective, Detroit's starting 6, Hasek's in goal. Their starting 6 payroll is bigger than the entire Carolina's team. So that's his free cap. So we are clutching and grabbing and holding. I mean, so to give you an idea of the players, right? Shanahan, Fedorov, Yzerman, Hull, Robitaille, Datsuk, Lidstrom, Chelios. There's another Hall of Famer, might be Murphy in there. Like, you're going to get beat by 15 goals a night, but we could grind them. And we did. So we beat Toronto, we beat Montreal that year, and Jersey, who was a team in its heyday. So when they came in with his obstruction rules, they also came in with a cap in that time, and the game got way faster. And, when you take a lot of the clutching and grabbing out of the game, you also take a lot of the confrontation out of the game. And I mean that in a good way. So when you're clutching and grabbing, the elbows used to get up, right? You'd be grabbing people, and then,
you don't need to demonstrate.
Listen, we both know if we got into a fight, she'd win, right? She'd outmean me in the end. There's a chance. But the game got way faster, which means these young kids could come in and play, right? There's no clutching and grabbing. So Nick Helix can come in and play as a 160-pound guy because he can skate. That's the biggest change by far. Some things never change, no matter what has changed on the ice. And you're seeing it with Tampa and Dallas now. The things that you need to do to win a hockey game have never changed, right? The grit, the one-on-one battles, the confrontations, certainly the skill and the playmaking that we see now is off the charts. But the grit, the block shots, all of that stuff, the hard parts of the game of hockey haven't changed one bit. And you can't get around that. You can't outskill a Stanley Cup, right? You look at Pittsburgh for those years from 2009 till when they went back to back. They had a phenomenal team, but it was actually them grinding that got them the next 2 Stanley Cups. So 2006. Long answer to your question is in 2006 when they changed the rules and they took the exception of the game for me just took off.
Okay, so you guys have been in Winnipeg now for the past 7 years. You seem to have set some roots in Winnipeg, and you seem to really enjoy your time here. Why has this cold prairie kind of city felt like home for you guys?
Well, I grew up in Sydney Maurice, so Winnipeg's just a bigger version of my hometown. My wife grew up just outside of Windsor, Ontario. Second time I got fired in Carolina. We're driving home, and it's Christmas from Carolina up to my wife's home, and the kids are still young. I said, my biggest regret in life is that my kids won't have a chance to grow up the way I did, the way we did. 3 years later, we're living in Winnipeg, and there they are. This is our home, right? At that time, I think my kids won't know how to drive in the snow, which bothered me. You should know how to drive in the snow. So 3 months later, we're in Winnipeg, man. We're driving in the snow. Anyway, for me, the most important thing, no matter where you were, is how your kids enjoy the experience, because you're not happy if your kids aren't happy. On a personal note, I love the outdoors. We were fortunate a couple of years ago to find a place down on Lake of the Woods. I have been away from, I've been here since 2015, non-work related. I believe I've been outside of Winnipeg for 8 days. So I'm just here. We love the people. The reason for all of that is, though, my kids came here, for Sydney, it was Larry Bumstead, the coach. Larry coaches the St. Mary's team. Sydney, he was like almost her first contact. Sydney went and played hockey there for the high school team. And the next thing you know, she's got a million friends. And I can tell you that story for my other two boys. For them, maybe it's kind of St. Paul's. But all three of my kids got here, found phenomenal friends, and really started enjoying their life. So that's it. Like, there's nothing else for us then. So you're right, we did set roots. My wife just finished kind of building a house, and this plan would be, if things continue the way our three kids are going to end up in Winnipeg, and we'd be very happy to have that happen. And that means mom and dad are tagging around. We're sticking around. So this is home for us. We plan on it being home forever. And I guess the real reason, at the end of the day, the people in this town are spectacular. It's the way I grew up. The people are wonderful.
Sid, what about you? Kind of same answer?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I mean, when I moved to Winnipeg, it was my third high school, and I just had, good times. I just had grade 12 left. So I kind of went into it being like, well, even if it's not so great, I only have 1 year left. And yeah, I ended up meeting a bunch of people that I really liked. I don't know, like maybe it's because my parents were Canadian, but when I moved here, it was kind of just like, oh, these are my kind of people, I did find out that I get hives from the cold. Yeah, I get hives from cold wind. Didn't know that anywhere else. He also kind of.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, if I'm walking to class and I don't have gloves on, I get hives. So shout out to Winnipeg.
So perfect to Winnipeg for that then.
Yeah, that's a really good time for me. But other than that, can't complain.
Okay, so just a little bit of a trivia question, or a little question about, it sounds like, and I've heard from Taylor that, Paul, you're a little bit of a Caddyshack fan. And we kind of have a bet going here between the three of us, who your favorite Caddyshack character is from the movie.
It's got to be Carl, right? Like, yeah.
So who won
that? Who won that?
Jared won it.
There we go.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be Carl.
Classic.
He's a pro looper.
Yeah. Yeah, Chewy said if you're ever looking to get rid of any of your Caddyshack memorabilia, he's all over it. He wants to be the first guy to.
It's just a poster. You know what? We've got, we don't collect, my wife collects some things. I don't really collect anything, but we've got 4 posters of movies that we felt as a family. So Caddyshack was a big one for me growing up. Slapshot was a big one. Star Wars, believe it or not, for my wife and I, both around the right same time. And then it's Lord of the Rings, right? Sid's the other one. So Lord of the Rings is, my wife is all over that kind of stuff.
She's a nerd.
My wife's a nerd. And then I got I don't think a lot of people know this. We got 2 small posters downstairs. One's for one of my favorite movies was Cool Hand Luke, and one of my wife's favorite is Big Jake. And it turns out that my boys are named Luke and Jake. So that's kind of how that happened. We liked those names off movies that we really liked.
Where'd my name come
Big,
from?
Sydney Karen, your name came from, it was the one, I can't, yeah. It took us about 3 days.
I heard that I was the baby for 2 days.
No, you were
And
Lily.
then-
You're
No,
French.
but you couldn't pronounce it.
I can't say it.
And then wasn't it Pete that was like, "Oh, just call her Sydney."
So that's a true story. Pete DeBoer comes down to North Carolina. We're supposed to go golfing at Myrtle Beach, and my wife's very pregnant with Sydney, and so Pete's got his wife there. We're really close at this time. Pete and I are going golfing, except my wife's water breaks, so we have this baby, and Sydney's going to be named after Mitch's grandmother, right, Lily? Except I can't say it, so we name her Lily, and this is driving me nuts for 2 days. Like I walk in, I can't say it. It doesn't come out of my mouth. So by day 3, she's still not named. And Pete DeBoer walks in and he's had it. He just loses his mind. You guys got to name this baby. So we came up with Sydney because neither one of us had a bad story. My wife's a teacher, right? So she's known every person whose name I wanted got shot down because she knew a girl, and it was a terrible story. So Sydney was the one name that she couldn't, there were no Sydneys, so she didn't have a bad story about it. So that's how she got named Sydney.
And then you guys went golfing finally.
Then we went golfing and shot 76. That was good.
That's awesome.
Well, we won't keep you any longer. We really appreciate you guys coming on. Sid, you got class in about 10 minutes. So thanks again for coming on and sharing some stories. It was really fun for us to interview you guys.
Appreciate
All
it.
right, guys. Thanks for having us.
Take care.
Bye, guys.